Hello board games and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some new announcements and discoveries I just found out about. I do have a few to go over this week, and the first one is that they did just announce the Season 3 for the game Final Girl. This is going to be launching over on Kickstarter, and if you're not familiar with this game, this is a solo horror style game where you'll be able to pick whichever final girl that you want to play as you go up against a final boss in a particular location. You'll be able to mix all three of those different variables together to create all sorts of different permutations, and there's already 2 seasons of this game out already, but if you are looking for more, this one will be launching on September 19th. And this next announcement I did actually know several weeks ago, but I forgot to ever mention it on the channel, and that's that there is going to be a new expansion coming for the game Terraforming Mars. They already have Prelude 1, but now they're going to be bringing in Prelude 2. And if you are familiar with this game and that original expansion, Prelude 1 added a bunch of starter cards that will give you some starting resources as well as an ability, and basically sped up the start of the game, giving you a little bit more of an engine to begin with, which I think improved the game quite a bit. This new expansion is going to be adding more of those cards, but taking into account all the new expansions that have been released since then, which means that these Prelude cards will be incorporating different elements from all the other expansions as well. And I have mixed feelings about this expansion. On one hand, I'm glad that there's more content being added to the game for those of you that want more content, and I don't see any issue with this fitting into the existing big box solution that they released a couple years ago. But on the other hand, I thought it was either directly said or heavily implied that there wasn't going to be any more content added to this game. But I do also have the memory of a goldfish, so I did pull up their previous big box campaign and check the facts section where it says that the big box does have room for a small amount of feature content, which does fit the description here. So I guess as long as they're not adding a bunch of new content making the big box obsolete, I guess I'm okay with it. And the final update I have for you is that there will be a new campaign for the game Dead Reckoning, and this one's actually going to be launching in the start of 2024, so it's still a ways away. But if you were interested in this game and you wanted to try and get a copy for yourself, you will have an opportunity for that. If you're not familiar with this game, this is a game by John D. Clear that only went to Kickstarter. There's not another way to get it through retail, and this is essentially a deck building but also a card building game. So you'll be building up your deck of cards, but then you'll also be able to upgrade the cards within that deck because some cards are clear and you can actually layer them on top of each other. You can also put them into sleeves that also have different types of print on them, which will affect the cards you put in those sleeves. Unlike the previous campaigns, this one's not going to be adding a brand new saga or a bunch of extra content that you're going to have to learn in order to play it in your game. Instead, this one is more focused on just adding more of what you're already familiar with. There's going to be new crew, new islands, new ships, and new achievements, as well as just more cards that you'll be able to mix into your game and just have even more variety regardless on which saga that you decide to play. Of course, like I said, this one is not ever going to retail, so this is just another opportunity to get your hands on the game and get as much or little content as you are interested in. But if you are looking for more content, we do have you covered, at least here in the YouTube world, because you can go ahead and check out Alex over at Board Game Co. because him and I do work together keeping track of all these campaigns, and I do these videos every week covering all the games in detail, and then he puts out a video at the start of each month going over the heavy hitters for that month, and he did just put out his video for July, so this is a great opportunity for you to go ahead and check out his video and see what this month has to offer so far. He also offers a ton of other great content on his channel as well that you'll definitely want to check out if you are interested in crowdfunding board games. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description below, but that's everything I have for an intro, so let's check out the campaigns. And we do have a bit of a lighter week here, which for me is awesome because there have just been a ton of games to cover in the past few weeks and a ton of really exciting games that have been fighting to get my money and succeeding. And a break now and again is not a bad thing, but we still do have some exciting games launching this week, and the first one is for On the Underground, Paris and New York. This one's also going to be including the previous maps as well for Berlin as well as London, but this one is a campaign that did launch back in November on Kickstarter, and now they're launching it on GameFound. This is a game that plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play, and this is a competitive game of building up subway stations and then trying to make sure that your subway stations are used the most. The way this game works is at the start of each turn, you're going to be drawing a number of location cards, and these determine where the passenger wants to go on the main board. There's just one passenger out on the main board, and players are going to be navigating that passenger through the different routes trying to get that passenger to the locations that they're trying to get to. The game plays over a number of turns where each player is going to get 4 actions on their turn where they'll be able to do different things like build subway stations where the passenger can enter and leave the subway, or build the different railways between the stations, which will gain you victory points for connecting stations. But it also allows you to build your colored of subway rails within that route, and any time that the passenger takes that route, no matter how much of your color is within that route, it's going to earn you a victory point. Players can also gain victory points for connecting different locations and points of interest onto the rail system, and you can also gain different tokens that you can spend in order to branch off of existing railways. But of course, these are just the core rules to the game, and there are 4 maps being offered in this campaign, with each of them bringing some slight changes and tweaks and mechanisms that will be specific for that map. And if you are interested, or if you want to check out each of those individual maps to see what they add to the game, you can check out the campaign, and I have links to that in the description below. The next campaign we have launches on July 4th, and this one's called Limits of Glory, Bonaparte's Eastern Empire. And this plays 1 to 2 players and takes about 90 to 200 minutes to play. And this one is a head-to-head war game where one player is going to be playing as the French, invading Egypt and fighting against their allied forces. The game plays over 3 phases, starting with the invasion phase where each player is going to be fighting for position on the map, as the player playing as the French makes their way in from the sea, trying to take position on the coasts, and the other player is trying to defend those locations. The second phase is known as the disembark phase, which is just a really quick phase that uses a table to determine where the different units land on the different coasts. And this is all depending on how each player fared on the previous phase. And then the final phase is the conquest phase, which is the majority of the game, where players are going to be going into combat and resolving that combat through dice rolling, because each of your units are going to be represented by these different tokens out on the board, and each of your units could have different abilities as well as be associated with different dice. They also have a different starting glory amount, which you can spend in order to reroll your dice or force rerolls of your opponents, but it also kind of acts as your morale, and if you get too low on your overall glory, it can also have some negative effects. But an interesting thing about this game is that players are also going to be rolling their dice to determine how many actions they get on their turn, but you can also spend your glory here to reroll in order to try and get more actions. Players will be fighting back and forth until one of their win conditions is met, and then that player will be the winner. But there will also be random events occurring throughout the game, having various effects on the map or the players themselves. And if you are interested to know about this one, I do have a link to the campaign in the description below, and you can go ahead and click to get notified. And launching on July 5th, we have Coloma, the Deluxe Edition, as well as the new Prospects expansion. And this plays 1 to 6 players. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. But for those of you that are not familiar with Coloma, I'll go into explain how that one plays first, and then I'll let you know what the new Prospects expansion adds to the game. But essentially the way this game works is that each player is going to be starting the game with their own personal player board, as well as some meeples and workers that you'll be able to use to perform various actions, and also some additional starting resources. The game plays over 3 rounds, with each round having 5 phases, but essentially players are going to be using this wheel in the center of the main board in order to perform their actions. Each section in this wheel has 2 actions for the players to use, and if you go to that space, you actually get to perform both of those actions, and you're also going to get the bonus associated with that space, because around the perimeter of this wheel there are a bunch of randomly placed bonuses, and anytime that you perform an action in that location, you'll get that bonus. But some of the different actions available are to gain different types of resources, convert resources into other resources, or use those resources to pay to build buildings. There's a whole bunch of different building cards that you'll be able to acquire throughout the game, and each of these buildings are actually going to have 2 different actions that are going to be available to you anytime that you activate the icon associated with that building's action. So if you have 3 buildings that all have the shovel associated with them, anytime that you perform the shovel action, you'll be able to activate all 3 of those buildings. And of course, to activate those buildings through those icons, you'll have to perform the action in the wheel that has that specific icon. But aside from building the buildings, there's also actions that allow you to build bridges. And the difference here is that those bridges are going to give you scoring objectives that you'll be able to pursue throughout the game. There's also an action that players can use in order to gain more horses into their supply, and the reason that you would want to do that is because there's also another action that allows the player to travel, and you can only travel up to the distance of the number of horses that you have in your supply. And whenever you travel, you're going to be moving around on this map, gaining different bonuses as you move across the spaces, but then also putting down tents that can give you additional bonuses throughout the game. Players can also perform an action to draft one of the barrels at the top of the board, which will give you a benefit that you'll gain by spending that barrel. But anytime you do that, there's going to be bandits that appear based on how many players perform this action. Luckily, there is also another action where you can put your cowboys out to fight against these bandits, and at the end of each round, players are going to get benefits or losses depending on how much they contributed to that pool. But another really important thing to know about the action wheel is that there's actually a component that's going to be rotating on top of it that's acting as its own action location, and it's always available every single round, but it's also always going to be covering one of the other action locations, which means that your available action spots are going to be changing every single time. Not only that, but there's also a smaller wheel that's going to be covering up one of the secondary actions at any of the action locations, making it unavailable for whichever players are performing their action there. And the way that this works is that players are actually going to be choosing which action location they want to use in secret, and then whichever action location has the most players at it is going to be the location that busts, and you're going to be rotating that smaller wheel to that location, covering that second action. And the game continues like this, with players choosing their actions, gaining and building different bridges and buildings in order to build their engine, and then also moving around on the various other locations on the board. And this new expansion is actually going to be adding quite a lot to the base game, so if you're interested in adding a little bit more complexity, this is definitely a good expansion in order to do that, because first of all, they're going to be replacing all the buildings with completely new and revamped buildings, adding a little bit more options with each of them, and incorporating some new ideas with the new expansion. But it's also going to be expanding onto the player boards, adding a trail all around the perimeter of your board that you'll be able to use anytime that you bust, as well as through other actions and buildings that you might gain throughout the game. Moving along these can give you benefits, but some paths are more risky than others, and it's going to be up to the players to prepare which paths they want to choose, depending on the amount of risk that they want to take. It's also going to be giving you a brand new set of wheels that can replace the original ones on the action board, which are going to be giving you some new ways to gain barrels, as well as introducing a neutral meeple that's going to be moving around the action board, which of course makes choosing the location with that neutral meeple a little bit more risky because it is more likely to bust. And this is a game that's gotten quite a lot of positive reviews, as well as a seal of excellence from Tom Vasel himself. So if you are interested in this game, I think you can have a lot of confidence in backing it. You can check it out. I have links in the description below. And the next campaign we have is also launching on July 5th, and this one is for Planet Unknown, as well as the new Supermoon expansion. This plays 1 to 6 players, it takes about 60 to 80 minutes to play, and this one is also a really popular one because this one is our Discord pick of the week. And this one earned that title with flying colors, and I don't think it's only because there's so few games this week, because this one actually got 45 votes, which is actually really, really high considering no other campaign in the recent weeks has even come close to getting that many votes. But this is also a campaign that I already have footage for, so I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. And if you're interested in it, you can check it out. I got links in the description below. And this new version of the game is going to be a deluxe edition of the game, but it's also going to be including a brand new expansion. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is a polyomino tile placement type game where each player is going to be building their own planet, trying to install different tiles in order to try and fill up the planet as much as possible. Each of the tiles that you're going to be adding will have different icons on them, which are going to allow you to move up various tracks on your board, which will unlock different bonuses and help score you victory points for the end of the game. Each player is also going to have their own rover that they're going to be moving around on the board for different purposes. And then each of the players' trackboard is actually going to be unique because it's going to be representing their specific corporation. This means that they can all work a little bit differently. There can be different bonuses for the different tracks. The tracks can actually look very different from each other, and they each come with their own unlockable special abilities. And like I said, players will be gaining victory points for moving up these different tracks, but you're also gaining victory points for filling up the different rows and columns of your planet completely. And then you're also going to be gaining victory points for completing different objectives. An interesting thing about the way the objectives work in this game is that at the start of the game, you're just going to be drawing those randomly and then putting them between each of the adjacent players. This means that each player is going to be competing for that objective with the player beside them. And in this game, you're going to be getting most of your polyominoes from this tray in the center of the table, and this tray actually rotates around just like a Lazy Susan, and players are going to be taking turns as the lead player, rotating that into whatever position that they want, because at the start of the game, each player is associated with a specific side of that Lazy Susan, and as the lead player, you get to choose whichever side you want to rotate towards yourself, and then every player is going to be able to choose one of the two tiles that are facing their side. Each player's first tile has to be placed on the edge of their planet, but then any tile that you place after that only has to be connected to an existing tile. These tiles can have all sorts of different terrain and different icons, which, like I said, will be moving you up the various tracks, which I also said can grant you all sorts of bonuses. These can come in the form of bonus points, different abilities, civilization cards, which will work as set collection, or even special actions that you'll be able to perform later in the game, or they can also get you some extra tiles. But whenever you put out a tile, there's also a chance that it could have a meteorite icon on it. And whenever you see that, you're going to be putting the meteorite token onto that tile. And then that meteorite's actually going to be blocking scoring for both the column and row of wherever that meteorite is placed. But luckily, you players will be able to acquire rovers throughout the game, and each time that you're able to get a rover icon, that's going to allow you to move that rover to adjacent spaces, and you'll be able to upgrade the amount of distance that you'll be able to move, and you can actually use that rover to pick up those meteorites and take them off your board, and even potentially use them for other actions. That's not the only use for your rover, because there's also some other opportunities and ways to score points with other items that you can pick up on the planet. The game continues like this until a player no longer has a space on their board where they're able to put one of the available tiles. Then as soon as that happens, that's going to trigger the end of the game, and then all the players are going to be adding up their victory points, and the player with the most victory points wins the game. The new expansion is going to be introducing a brand new board so that each of the players can also build out their supermoon alongside with their planet. And of course, that's going to come with some different effects, but players will be able to choose whether they want to put their polyominoes on either of their boards, giving them a little bit more flexibility and a bit more options when it comes to what they're trying to achieve. Looks like a ton of fun, and I think you can have a lot of confidence back in this one if you are interested in it, since it is a reprint and the game's already out there with people playing it and enjoying it. And I've only heard a ton of positive feedback on this game, so if you want to check it out, or if you do want to learn more, I do have links in the description below. And launching on July 6th, we have Tales of Evil, and this plays 1 to 6 players. It takes about 60 minutes to play. And this one is a cooperative narrative horror campaign game. And the way this game works is that each player is going to be playing as their different characters, each with their own set of stats, weapons, and gear, as well as their own action cards. And something that's really interesting about this game is that it is cooperative and players are going to be doing mostly their own thing. But when it comes to moving around the board, all the players are actually going to be moving together. Players are going to be trying to attempt different chapters in order to try and complete the different objectives that the chapter has to offer. And you're going to be moving through the board, trying to search and interact with different items, complete different narrative events that will be triggered based on the different actions that players perform, which could cause players to roll for different skill tests where you're going to be combining your roll along with your associated skill to determine your success. Or it might have you fighting different monsters where the monsters can actually damage both your body and mind. If your mind takes too much damage, you're going to be getting scared, which is then going to be eating away at your health anyway. And if you do take too much damage, then all the players are going to be running for their lives, which essentially means that you're abandoning your mission and losing that specific game. But a really interesting aspect of this game is that it has a bunch of really unique and interesting components that really add a lot of atmosphere and immersion into the game, because players will be using all these different items in order to solve different clues or make decisions or perform various actions throughout the game. And of course, if the players are able to complete their objectives without running away in fear, then they win the game and move on to the following chapter. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I have links in the description below. And that's everything I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we still have a giveaway to announce, and this one's going to be for a pledge for Timelancers. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a competitive worker movement game where players are playing as contractors that are hired to modify history. Players are going to be moving around on a hex board, performing 3 movements on their turn, and with each movement you're going to be moving across different hexes. Each of these hexes have an action associated with them, and whenever you move onto that hex, you're going to be performing its action. These actions are going to allow you to gain different resources as well as activate your time machine so that you can capture different events. And anytime that you capture an event in history, you'll be able to put that onto your time machine board in chronological order, but deciding whether you want to repeat the event in the way that it happened, or flipping it 180 degrees, indicating that that event has been modified. You're going to have access to different actions depending on the orientation of the card, but there is an additional catch anytime you modify an event because it's going to have a ripple effect to all the events that happened after it. This means that any of the events chronologically after that card are going to be flipped 180 degrees, granting you the opposite action of what you had previously, but this is actually going to affect all players as well as the main player board, because any of the hexes that match that color are also going to get flipped over to their opposite side, revealing a different action. And of course, players are going to be doing this to complete different jobs and gain victory points, and that is one way that you can win the game. But you can also win the game if you capture enough events. And this giveaway is going to be for a deluxe edition of the game, which is going to get you the core game, all of the upgraded components and Kickstarter exclusives, and all the unlocked stretch goals. And to enter this giveaway, all you have to do is leave a comment down below, and you can say anything you want, but if you're looking for something specific, maybe you could let us know at what point in time that you would want to travel back to if you had access to a time machine. For myself, I'm not too greedy, so I'd be happy just to go back a few months and sell all my crypto and stocks before the entire market tanked. But we still do have the giveaway to draw a winner for last week, and this giveaway was for a pledge for Solar Titans, which you can go ahead and check out on Kickstarter now. But to draw a winner, use this fancy application here. All these extra entries are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you like the sort of content you want to help make these efforts a little bit more sustainable for me, truly do appreciate it. You can find a link to my Patreon in the description below. But let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw the winner. And the winner of Solar Titans is Jeff Sherples, and this is one of our Patreon subscribers, so I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for Solar Titans. Congratulations on the win, but that is everything I have for you this week. I hope you all have an excellent weekend, and for all my fellow Canadians out there, I hope you enjoy your Canada Day long weekend. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.